Scully Productions.
What's up, Joe? What's up, everybody? Baseball is back, and fans across the country are excited. None more than our baseball analyst, Rob Duran of Rob Duran Sports. Rob dropped by to talk about some of the pressing issues facing baseball as it seeks to return to the field of play. There's a lot on tap for baseball and for us, so we're getting to it right now on Sports 360. Joining me today on Sports 360 is our resident baseball analyst and expert and all that good stuff, Rob Duran of Rob Duran Sports. Rob, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing well, Jeff. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, Rob, always good to have you back. Always good to have you on to talk baseball. And as we're sitting here on Sunday, June 28th, we have baseball on the horizon. I can't say we have an agreement, right? But the negotiations are over between Major League Baseball and the Players Union. Rob Manfred, the commissioner of baseball, has set a 60-game schedule, and training camps. Players are reporting this week, July 1st. So, first of all, man, how do you feel about all of that with baseball now officially on the horizon?
I'll tell you, as a fan, I can't wait, and it's about time that we have some dates in place. We have the number of games that we're going to play, and we're starting to see, the schedules kind of being worked out and things like that. It's exciting to know that you have baseball to look forward to after, all the back and forth and the public fight between the MLBPA and the owners and all that stuff. So I'm just happy to say, at least for today, I can say baseball is here. It's back, and it's starting to feel good. Like I'm excited. I'm excited.
And what do you think about 60 games? I mean, obviously, I know as being the huge baseball fan that you are, you would want more than that, more than 60 games. But what are your thoughts about 60 games and how that might play out?
It'll be interesting. I was kind of hoping for, the halfway point. I knew we wouldn't get the 162. I think the MLBPA offered 114 at one point. I knew that was too much. But, I was kind of hoping for somewhere between 80, 85 games, something around there. But we got 60. So, I'm not going to complain because it's actually something. But 60 games is going to be very interesting because I feel like right from the get, it's going to be playoff atmosphere type games because you can't have any prolonged slumps. You can't have these losing streaks because a 5-game losing streak could be a 15-game losing streak, in a full season. So it's gonna be fun. You're gonna see a lot of teams, I think, that maybe in a long season maybe didn't have a playoff shot, maybe kind of creep in and make some noise later in this 60-game season. And I think a lot of what we're gonna see too is teams that have these strong bullpens are going to prosper a little bit more, especially probably to the first half of the season, I would say. So I'm looking forward to that, to see how it's going to work out with the pitching matchups and how the offense and the pitching is going to kind of work its way into this, I guess, summer training or spring training part 2, and how they develop and going into the season and going against each other. So it's definitely going to be, I think, must-watch games every single game for the 60-game season.
You're right. I mean, there's going to be very little margin for error. Getting off to a 2-8 start in your first 10 games, 5-15 in your first 20 could be, game over, right?
Yeah.
For any team that starts out that way. I mean, all we have to look to right now or look back on is the Washington Nationals from last year, right? A
Yeah.
team that I believe by the halfway point, might not have even been a 500 team or was hovering around 500. And then obviously they became one of the hotter teams over the second half, rode that into the playoffs and into a World Series. There's not going to be anywhere near that type of time to get your footing under you. You have to come out firing. And so that part's going to be interesting, especially given that the players have never, baseball players, like other players, are creatures of habit and routine.
Yeah.
And to say that routines have been disrupted would be the understatement of the year. So how players adjust to this new, way of approaching the game, having, as you said, a summer training, right? Spring training part two. Never had that before. Only playing 60 games and obviously playing in the current scenario of the ongoing pandemic and all that brings, um, you know, brings a lot of variables to the table. And so, as you said, the teams that get off to a good start are going to have a significant advantage.
Yeah, and one thing that I also want to point out too, a lot of these younger teams, sometimes we'll see at the beginning of the season, all the headline, oh, are these, this young team, are they contenders? And then they fade off towards the, midpoint, all-star game area, or even a little bit later sometimes. I'm interested to see if some of those teams that start off hot, that may not be contenders in that 162 game season, those young teams that are almost ignorant to the fact that they're in the show, if they get in there and they're hot and right away and they actually get close to making a playoff, I can't wait to see that. A team that I can think of is like the White Sox. They added some veterans. They have some great young talent. I can't wait to see that team play in such a short season.
Yeah, and the White Sox was one of the teams that was expected to perhaps contend, given
Yeah.
that the Central is not at what it used to be. Now we still got Cleveland, obviously have Minnesota. Cleveland is not the same as it has been in recent years. But you're right. I mean, Chicago is one of those teams. Even Cincinnati, I
Yeah.
think, has been a team that, you know, some have said this might be the year in which they could make a step forward. But I think back, to a few years ago where you have the Florida Marlins, for example. I guess now they're the Miami Marlins. It would have a low payroll, and yet they'd be scrappy and gritty, and they would contend, but not quite make it.
Yeah.
You're right. There's always some team, and typically a younger team. The flip side of that coin, though, Rob, is the veteran teams. And, sometimes you have veterans that, because they're veterans, they need a little time to get going,
Yep.
right? And time is not something that teams have in abundance right now with such an abbreviated schedule. So the combination of those young, hungry teams, as you said, who might not even know any better, but just going out there and playing and maybe getting off to a good start, combined with maybe some veteran teams, some teams that were expecting to compete but get out the gate sluggishly, that could make for some interesting dynamics.
Yeah, and that's another thing to watch too, because I even look at a team like the World Series champ, the Nationals. A lot of teams come back with that World Series hangover, and obviously, they lost Rendon, but they're still loaded on pitching, and their offense is still pretty good. So that'll be one team to watch that may struggle out the gate, not just because of the World Series hangover part, but also because maybe they need a little bit of time to get going. And I think the big thing is going to be starting pitching. I don't expect complete games so early in the season. And one of the Nationals' biggest strength is their starting pitching. So I don't expect Scherzer to go out there and throw 8 innings on game one. We may be looking at 4 innings, 5 innings, something that we more see as bullpen games throughout the beginning of this shorter season now. So it'll be interesting to see those teams that are heavy loaded on starting pitching, maybe not have such strong bullpens, how they compete and go into the first part of the season.
Yeah, all of that will be interesting to watch as we get ready for, hopefully, will be a season that the reports right now are saying would start July 23rd or July
Yeah.
24th, with players reporting to camp this week, July 1st. So we'll see how that goes. One thing I do want to touch on, Rob, is, and you alluded to it, and that was the negotiations between baseball and the union. Very contentious. Um, it dragged out over weeks, very publicly, and in the end did not result in an agreement being reached. But I wonder, even though now we're going into the season and hopefully we'll have a full 60 game season plus playoffs, I just wonder what these negotiations, as contentious as they were, as public as they were, what does that foreshadow, if anything, as we go into 2021, which will be the last year of the current CBA? It seems to me that it could be some storm clouds on the horizon. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is just kind of like a preview of what's to come, to be honest. And it's unfortunate because the last thing you want to hear is that kind of news when as a fan you're seeing, oh, baseball is back, but you do have to look ahead if you're someone that follows the sport, on a long-term basis. The public fights and the going back and forth, and like you pointed out, they were very public, very, very public, and that's never a good thing, especially with so much. It was a lot of strong language between both sides, going back at each other, a lot of taking shots at each other, and that doesn't look good when it comes to the negotiations, and you're trying to negotiate the new CBA and, bring some peace between the sides for an extended period of time. So I'm excited for today that we have baseball back and we have dates and all that stuff. But looking ahead, I'm very, very concerned because baseball might be in trouble, and I'm not going to say they're going to go on strike because we're not there yet. But the negotiations to negotiate the new CBA, I don't think they're going to go smooth. We'll leave it there. I'll put it that way. I don't think it's going to be smooth.
Yeah, and look, as on the one hand, I think we have to deal with a certain reality here. That on the one hand, we have this good news of baseball being back and the anticipation of the game returning in 2020 and hopefully being able to complete this abbreviated season. But then on the other hand, we have some other considerations that aren't so good and aren't so happy. And you say, well, why do you have to
Mm-hmm.
bring that up? Well, it's because we can't stick our heads in the sand, right?
Yes.
There are some good things to look forward to, but there are some other things that we have to be prepared for that are going to be coming close on the heels of where we are right now. I mean, we're in July of 2020, and so it's just the reality that we're dealing with. And on that point, Rob, another reality that we have to deal with that maybe doesn't bring a lot of smiles to people's faces, but it's a reality, are the safety concerns under which players, the safety conditions under which players are coming back, and the concerns that they have. Um, the virus has been spiking, right, in various states across the country. There's no doubt about that. And players are returning at this particular time. Give us your thoughts about that.
Yeah, something like you said that people won't want to hear, but it's the reality of our situation now. And it's not a matter of if, I believe, if players are going to test positive. I think once these players start trickling in and staff and all that other stuff, there are going to be more positive tests. And MLB is putting together plans, and I think the plans that they have in place will have room for flexibility because we don't know how many players are going to test positive once everyone is back or what's going to happen in that situation. But, it is something that as fans, as people who follow the sport, we need to be aware that, there still is a pandemic. This is the reason why we only have a 60-game season, why, sports are on shutdown right now. It's because of this pandemic. So we can't forget that that's the reason why things are the way they are. And this is our new normal, at least for this year, hopefully. So it is a scary thought to see that, okay, yeah, we got baseball back, but there's still a pandemic we have to deal with. There's still a lot of health concerns that, players, their families, there's team doctors, there's umpires, et cetera, so on and so forth. And then these guys are traveling, throughout the season. So that's not just something, where they're going to be stuck in one state or two states, like was talked about way back when. But, these guys are traveling up and down the country, playing their games. So they're at even more risk of testing positive for COVID-19. So it is something that we have to keep an eye on and be very well aware that this is the reality. Players are going to test positive. How is that going to affect the season? Or is the season going to be able to continue and finish? It's a lot of questions. We have certain answers, but more questions arise as a result of that.
No question about it. No question. And, there is a protocol in place, over 100 pages. Major League Baseball, the Players Union did a great job in negotiating that and
Yeah.
coming to a very comprehensive document that covers everything from soup to nuts. It's a daunting document when you look at it. And yet, it seems like this virus is even more daunting, right? Because of what we've seen, especially in states like Florida and Texas, Georgia, Arizona, and so forth, where we've seen these spikes in recent weeks. And as you mentioned, the NBA is planning to return in a dome in Orlando. NHL is planning to have 2 hub cities where they will resume their season. Baseball, even though it will have a regional schedule, which will minimize travel, still you're going to have players traveling from city to city, state to state. And in the current environment, that would not be the preference. But it's what we have. And so, players are going to show up, players are going to be tested. Some are going to test positive. That's just an unfortunate reality. Players aren't immune. They get affected just like the general population. I mean, when you look at, for example, golf, right? I mean, we had multiple positive tests in golf, which
Yeah.
which resulted in some high name players, Brooks Koepka among others, withdrawing. Not that he has it, but his caddy tested positive. Brooks tested negative, but he nevertheless withdrew from the Travelers tournament. And so in a sport, in an individual sport like golf, right, we see testing, because again, it's just about the virus, man. This is not about, and it can happen to anyone anywhere. And so we know it's going to happen in baseball. That's not being a Debbie Downer or a Denny Downer, whatever you want to call it. It's just reality, right? That's what we're going to see. But again, these are some of the realities we're dealing with, as we also are excited about the game coming back. Let's talk a little bit about the divisions, right? This realignment, where it'll be regional. So you would expect the Mets and the Yankees and the Nationals, among others, to be in one division, and the Dodgers, the A's, and Houston, I guess, would be out there in the West. But what do you think about the 10-team divisions, 10-team divisions?
I'll tell you what, I was excited when we were first hearing news about the spring training leagues kind of being the divisions at first. As a Yankee fan, I was very excited because I saw the teams in that division, and I said, the Yankees can hold their own really well there. Maybe 1 or 2 teams, I believe, that may give them some trouble. This schedule is a lot tougher for the Yankees, as well as for other teams, obviously. But I think, for the pandemic situation, it's great that they're kind of limiting by regions because it limits travel. But the divisions, it'll be fun because we'll see a lot more rivalry games, which I think fuels baseball and fuels baseball fans, even the casual fans. Everyone knows Yankees, Red Sox, Yankees, Mets with the Subway Series. That brings a lot of excitement. In LA with the Dodgers and the Angels playing each other. That's fun. That's what casual fans love to see. Everyone tunes into the rivalry games. And the fact that we'll have a lot of that, and basically that's our whole season, that brings a lot of intrigue and a lot of different types of storylines each and every series, which I think is great for the game of baseball.
Well, I mean, and I agree with you. I think that, having Yankees, Mets, and Yankees, Red Sox, and then you have some other good teams in the East, for example, like with Tampa and the Nationals in there as well. And so it will provide for some nice rivalry games. It will provide, for some tough matchups. I think every one
Yeah.
of these divisions would be tough. But, I mentioned to you before we got on that a good friend of mine, former Major League player Phil Bradley, wanted me to pass along. Um, he wanted me to pass something along to you. And,
Oh
he was
boy.
talking about the divisions. And at least at one point, these regional divisions were anticipated to look like this, at least in the East: Yankees, Mets, Red Sox, Nationals, Orioles, Phillies, Pirates, Blue Jays, Rays, and Marlins. And Phil Bradley wanted me to pass along to you, Rob, that your Yankees still have the easiest division of the three. What
Huh.
are your thoughts about that?
I mean, there's potential that it could be. And I'm not saying that those teams aren't any good, but I think, the Red Sox aren't going to be, I don't expect them to be that good this year. The pitching is going to took a hit. Obviously, they lost Mookie. The Rays, I think they're a very tough team. I'm actually kind of worried about the Rays because they're on the low. They made some really good moves this offseason, and their pitching and their bullpen is going to be a strength, which I think bodes well for them in this short season. I don't know if they're the easiest division for the Yankees, but I'll say this. I'm not overly concerned about the Yankees missing the playoffs. I believe they're a shoo-in to get in, and that's my hot take for today. But I don't see it as a cakewalk, but I'm not concerned. We'll put it that way.
Okay. I mean, yeah, because you figure the Mets should be competitive. The Nationals, again, they're the World Series champs. So, you don't want to discount them, but they're a little
No.
long in the tooth. They have the pitching, and as you said, they still have a good lineup, and so we have to consider them. But you do have the Orioles in there, the Pirates, the Marlins, and we were talking about, who could potentially be that sleeper of a team. I'm not saying the Marlins will be, but somebody in each division might emerge like that. And then, of
Yeah.
course, you have the Phillies. Can't overlook the Phillies with Bryce Harper, Reese Hoskins, and the rest of those guys. What about the Central, though? You have the Cubs, White Sox, Brewers, Cardinals, as you would expect. But you also have the Royals, Reds, Indians, Twins, Braves, and Tigers. Perhaps the Braves and Tigers for sure. What do you think about that division? I mean, because obviously the Braves and Twins, good teams. Indians might contend. Reds could be a sleeper. And then your White Sox, who you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I
Um,
do like Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati. I think I had them in the playoffs this year. But the White Sox, you touched on the White Sox. I had them in the playoffs for next year. I saw them as a team that they're young, but they added some veteran pieces that I like. They added some good pitching. But they're one of those young teams that I was talking about earlier. They may surprise a lot of people in such a short season, kind of come out on fire and just take things into the playoffs and maybe sneak in. I don't think they're like World Series contenders yet. Maybe they're a couple years away from that, but they're a team that I would keep an eye on because they have some young, really good talent, and Jimenez and Moncada. Those guys are the cornerstones of that franchise right now, and I think that that's a team to watch for me. I like the division. The Cubs, We saw them struggle a little bit last year towards the end. St. Louis somehow, I know you call them the boring team, but they're somehow always in it, regardless of who's on the roster. They're somehow always involved. But a team like the White Sox and a team like Cincinnati are two teams that I'm really looking at.
And then we go out west, where, of course, the Dodgers would be the first team that many would talk about. But you
Yeah.
also would have the Astros out there, and the Athletics. Two teams that were, when you look at those three teams, all were excellent last year. And then you mentioned the Angels. You'd have the Giants, the Padres, the Diamondbacks, Rockies, Rangers, and Mariners rounding out that division. What do you see there? Is that a cakewalk for the Dodgers, or will they have to tangle with the Astros and the A's and perhaps another team?
I'm looking forward to a lot of Dodgers Astros games. I'll tell you that. So that's going to be a storyline in itself. But I think the Dodgers will be fine. They're pretty loaded. They got Mookie, so I'm not concerned about the Dodgers at all. But a team that and this may come as a little bit of a surprise to certain people, I think the Angels are going to finally get a break and put Mike Trout in the playoffs. I think this is kind of like their window. I think Shohei Ohtani is going to do good this year. It's going to be a short season. I think offensively he's going to be a force. Hopefully Pujols, I know it's going to be a shock to hear this, but I think Pujols is going to have a little bit of a resurgent type season for him at his advanced age and all that stuff, because there's going to be less games for him to play. He'll be able to, get some rest in here and there. I think he's going to have a good season for what it's worth at a 60-game season. And, Mike Trout is Mike Trout, the best player on the planet. So I want to see the Angels in the playoffs, because I want to see Mike Trout in the playoffs and see what that team can do once they get in. But I'm not worried about the Dodgers. Houston, that every game they play is going to be a storyline. It'll be fun to see how players react to Houston coming back. But they're a talented team regardless of what they did in the past. The talent speaks for itself. I think they'll struggle a little bit out the gate, but they'll get it together. So I think Dodgers, Houston, they'll be fine. But I want to see the Angels make some noise.
Yeah, I think, I think there are many, many people, including folks at Major League Baseball, that would like to see Mike Trout in the playoffs. And so that remains to be seen. But you make a very interesting point with Houston and the Dodgers and being in the same division. And again, this is going off of, I was looking at a proposed division that went back months. I'm not sure if the divisions have actually been released or not. But when you look at how you would have to align teams just naturally, if you're going to have some, regional play, not that, Texas is in the same region as California, but that's the way it's been, right? With Texas and Houston playing in the West. Having multiple games between the Dodgers and the Astros could be potentially exciting just on its face because of the history there, including the cheating scandal involving the Astros, which, coming into this season was one of the bigger storylines. It probably, I think it's fair to say it's now been overshadowed, right, by the pandemic and what we're dealing with. But once these players cross the white lines and the competitive juices start to flow, you never know, as Joaquin Andujar used to say. You never know, and so we'll see what will happen here with these teams. Now, Rob, you made mention of Pujols, and you said he'll get a chance to get some rest in, and I'm sure they'll give him some days off. But here's the thing, though: we're talking about 60 games in 66 days.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of off time, and it's baseball. So that means rain and cancellations and so forth. So I'm sure that most teams aren't going to get the full 6 days off because there'll be some days where they will have to make up games or have increased double headers. Either way, you're talking about some additional demands on guys. So that's going to be interesting too, Rob. Trying to get in 60 games in 66 days with travel, with summer heat, with probably, more double headers than normal.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting because we're already talking about the pandemic possibly limiting certain things or limiting certain players just on that alone, and that's something that can't be controlled at all. And it's like we said earlier, it's not a matter of if, it's almost a matter of when. So rain delays, I mean, we saw a lot of rain delays for certain teams last season and how it affected them, having to play 22 games in 20 days kind of thing with the doubleheader. So that is an interesting point to bring up because that can affect a lot of things, for the long term in a 60-game season. If a team has to squeeze in maybe 2 doubleheaders, in a week kind of thing. So that'll be something, to look at as well.
Yeah, among many things. But first things first. Players are showing up this week. They'll undergo their testing, along with all the other physical evaluations that they go through upon reporting to camp. But this year, of course, the testing for the virus, takes front stage, right? And so we're going to be looking at that. Take center stage, I should say, but we're going to be looking at that more than anything. And, we likely will see, as you said earlier, some positive tests coming from it. But it's a great unknown, and a lot will be learned starting this week as we go forward. But baseball is back. It's planning to be back, and hopefully everything will go well, and we'll get in a full 60. So thanks for stopping by today, Rob, to talk about where we are right now. And I would anticipate that, as players come into camp and we get into training and exhibition games, that they'll have a handful of those. And then the regular season, obviously, coming closely behind that you and I will be talking to each other quite a bit. So I look forward to that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to it. And it feels good, at least for today, to say baseball is back. So that's the best thing I've said in a long time.
Yeah, it does feel good to know that we have the games on the horizon, and even with the other sports as well. So hopefully all will go well, and we'll be able to be talking real soon about the games. But until then, like I said, I think there'll be a lot of storylines coming out of Major League camps as players return. So let's make sure we stay in touch and get back on to talk about those stories as they develop.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, brother. Well, listen, enjoy the rest of your day. 4th of July is coming up next weekend, right?
Next weekend.
Yeah, so we're about to have the 4th of July holiday. And so if we don't speak before then, have a happy 4th. And I'm sure we'll be talking shortly after that. So take care, man, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Jeff. Take care, brother.
All right, you too.